Okay, so we're now underway. We're now being recorded. If anyone does not want to be recorded, now is your opportunity to leave. So we're going to, as I've been saying to the speakers before we started, what we're going to do is we have 5 papers here today and in this session, and what we're going to do is we're going to hear each one of these presentations, and then we will have a general conversation and discussion to finish up the session. And as I've also mentioned, this is we had a great start with the keynote, which was all about some of the big picture issues. Now, I guess in this session, we're actually getting down and looking at some of the details, and in particular details on how our practice as university museums and collections has changed in very recent times. So our first speaker in this session is Gustavo Ortiz. Gustavo is the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Bogota, Colombia, which is located in UNIMINUTO University of Colombia. Gustavo is the director of the museum. He has very strong interests in digital culture and also in museums and their social meaning. And so I'd like to invite Gustavo to talk to us on his topic of the digital challenge, curatorship in and post-pandemic. Gustavo.
Okay. Let me show my my image. Let me show. Second.
No problem. It's a fantastic background image you've got there. I presume, hopefully that's your museum.
It's a problem with share. Ready. You see the?
Yes.
Yep. Terrific.
Okay. Perfect. Let me.
Perfect.
First, I appreciate this invitation to share with yours 2 initiatives that have been a challenge and a great learning in and post-pandemic. For our Museum of Contemporary Art Bogota, being inclusive is part of our policy, is not an option or program. Since 2012, the UNIMINUTO University chose to admit students with different disabilities. This became a challenge for our museum. New perspectives were opened to explore all sensory fields such as taste, touch, sounds, and smell. Many contemporary works already included other sensory aspects beyond sight. New agreements with the students, with teachers, with managers are established. Our students have become our teachers. The digital approach to give value to the difference of the subjects in all aspects. The images go beyond the apparent. They go beyond the surface and the content itself. The images activate our symbolic universe. Sounds also complete the map of our senses. When these are lacking, is the signs that complement the communication. Our Colombian sign language teacher is a network technician student who is deaf. Text is in all its forms, include Braille, is an essential tool. Our Braille teacher is a psychology student and she is blind. ER and QR codes are equally value options. Our host of the videos in Colombian Sign Language is a communication student. Each sculpture has a token in Braille, text, and QR codes that give access to videos in sign language and descriptive audios. The thesis is not only presented at the Sala Magna, but also at the museum. For 18 years, we have been presenting the best degree thesis in visual arts from the Colombian universities. Today is one of the most recognized creation research projects. It started in 2004 to support students who did not have space to present their thesis. The thesis is a demanding academic work due to its rigor, reference, research, bibliography, language, and critical analysis. During 18 continued years, this project has exhibited more than 900 theses from the Colombian universities, and in recent times, it had also invited universities from Ecuador, Venezuela, and France. Due to the pandemic in 2020, we carry out virtual curatorship for the first time thanks to the alliance that we have established with Google Arts and Culture at 2012. Starting this year, the thesis project will be an hybrid with a presence and virtual exhibition. Now, the thesis project has a global audience and remains on the arts and culture platform beyond the spatial and agenda limitation of our museum. New artists now have an online reference for their work and their CV are increased. Let me talk about some conclusions. A good digital strategy builds strong ties with the real communities. The best virtual experience is when there is a previous face-to-face experience. Alliances are essential to carry out a good digital strategy. Behind each device, behind each post, there is a person. We cannot ignore the immense value of the subject over the object. Let me share with you a short timeline with the highlights in our process. We started with this digital era in 2004 with the work of the week. Then in 2006, we made the first contemporary electronic art festival. In 2008, we started with our new web page. In 2009, our first publication online. In 2010, we start with our fan page and Facebook. In 2011, we made our alliance with Google Arts and Culture. In 2011 too, we started with our YouTube channel. And in 2012, we started with this inclusive museum. At 2014, we made this special curatorship digital analogy. In 2016 is our 15th anniversary. In 2017, we redesigned our web page. And in 2018, we received the visit of international peers of accreditation. In 2019, we stay with yours at Tokyo and share our program, Museum Neighborhood. In 2012, we received the International Quality Accreditation from the American Alliance of Museum, AAM. And this year is our 55th anniversary. Some of highlights of digital strategy: we made online interviews with artists, virtual curatorships, live streaming, podcast, social media strategy, digital repository, conference and webinars, and of course, networking. Thanks. This is all is our Facebook and YouTube channels and our website. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you very much, Gustavo. You guys have obviously been on quite a journey over many years, and I've certainly got a few questions to ask you. Having heard a little bit about that, it sounds like it's great work, and it sounds like you've done a lot of things that a lot of other university museums could actually learn from, in terms of rethinking different forms of engagement and access. Anyway, hopefully we'll talk to that later on. Thank you very much, and thank you very much also for keeping very succinctly to time too. That's marvelous. We need people to stick to time, because that will keep Martin happy, and he won't have to kick us out of the room at the end. Okay, so let's now have our second presentation in this series, in this session, and we have a very interesting one now from Greece. The presentation is from Tsitou, Myrsini, Pichou, Evangelos, Papoulias. I'm sorry if I've made a horrible mess of your names. I do apologize, but it's very interesting because they're all people who are associated with the Athens University History Museum, which is at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens in Greece. And of course, as we know, there is a 200th anniversary that came around in the Greek nation in 2021. That also coincided, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately. Anyway, Faye is a curator and museum educator at the museum. Myrsini is a cultural manager and PhD candidate. And Evangelos is a researcher in archaeology and heritage. And their topic is celebrating the bicentennial during the COVID-19 pandemic. So over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. First of all, I have to share my presentation with you. Okay. For Greeks, the year 2021 marks the bicentennial since the outbreak of the Greek revolutions of 1821. This revolution led to the liberation of Greece after approximately 4 centuries of Ottoman rule. The majority of Greek museums and other institutions plan to celebrate this historical event with a plethora of scientific and cultural events. However, the outbreak of the COVID pandemic forced a change of these plans, and many initiatives were transferred into digital formats. In the same spirit, the Athens University History Museum had to adapt 2 of its projects. The first one is the museum's annual student competition. A project introduces high school students to the Athens University heritage and to the basic museum interpretation and communication techniques. And the second one, a large-scale exhibition dedicated to the association of the 1821 revolution with the university. Both events are realized under the auspices of the Committee Greece 2021, a national governmental committee that funds, catalogs, and promotes international events organized for the bicentennial. The presentation will present the 2 initiatives before and after the transformation into online experiences. It will examine the challenges we have to face with in our effort to restructure this project under a new perspective and to prioritize our digital interpretative means. Both challenges led us to the basic lesson learned, to stay alert and flexible. About the first one, the competition. The 6th annual student competition opened in autumn 2020 under the title From the War of Independence to the Cultivation of Knowledge, the Athens University in the newly formed Greek state. Its main aim is to introduce high school students to the Athens University heritage and to basic museum interpretation and communication techniques. This year, it runs in collaboration with the Athens University Historical Archive. First, let us say a few words about the history of the project, already presented before the Universeum annual meeting in Brno in 2020. The project first ran in 2015 and is addressed to schools in the region of Athens Attica. The students are asked to submit a paper and topic group touches on selected exhibits from Athens University museums. Also, they are asked to design a temporary exhibit under the same topic. The following academic year, the awarded students work closely with the museum staff to implement their proposal in any their chosen medium, original exhibits, labels, posters, short stories, digital applications, games, questionnaires, artwork, and many others in the gallery of the historic scientific instruments. But the pandemic demanded from us to react fast. In summer 2020, when it was not yet clear whether museums will open to the public, we announced the alternative from the competition to run either with physical presence, like every year, or online, depending on the governmental measurements of the time. This spring, realizing that the number of proposals submitted were rather poor, while school teachers and students were struggling to catch up with the curriculum, since teaching was mostly online, we decided to extend the sixth competition for 1 year, that is for 2021 to 2022. Also, we decided to run the project on a national level, accepting schools' submission beyond the region of Athens Attica on a provisional basis. Also, we had to rely more on the teachers' role as mediators who know the student better and could motivate them to participate more actively and sustain their interest. Then we had to rely on digital images and friendly PowerPoint presentation. For the second part of the presentation on how to design a museum exhibit, we presented the PowerPoint which we already use every year in our small auditorium. However, we did prepare more detailed written instructions, information and photos with the space and the samples of the past students' works. And finally, we filmed a short introduction with a museum guide inside the museum to give an idea of the museum's gallery. And now let me share with you some information and thoughts on the second project we had to adjust in 2021 and temporary exhibitions. In 2018, 2 years before the pandemic, the university decided to organize a large-scale exhibition of the museum in order to commemorate the 200 years in the revolution. The aim was to present to a wider audience the connection between the university and the revolution through displaying exhibits from the historical archive, the historical museum, and other university museum institutions. Soon academic staff, the staff at the Historic Museum and the archive, started working on the section of the exhibition and choosing potential exhibits. The main concept of the exhibition was to present the impact and association of the revolution with the foundation, organization and operation of the University of Athens since its inauguration to the present day. At the end of 2019, a first list of exhibits and main section had been decided. As expected, the pandemic, which started in March 2020, and the subsequent measures affected the organization of the project. So, in summer 2020, it was decided to replace the in real-life exhibition with a digital platform, a website. This new website would not focus on the bicentenary, but would keep the historical event as its starting point. It would be dedicated to the history of the University of Athens and its academic heritage. At the same time, it would promote the university's contemporary cultural presence. The aim was to launch that website in late 2021. Subsequently, a committee was formed which consists of faculty members from the Department of History and Archaeology, as well as members of staff from the museum and the archive. The main goal of this new medium were to create something contemporary and to attract a younger audience. The main section of the website will include a section with an exhibition on the history of the university since 1821 to the present day, a section dedicated to the university heritage, museum, libraries, etc., a timeline, an interactive map highlighting the main buildings of the institution, and 360 video section dedicated to the history of the university's main building, and a session dedicated to periodical exhibition activities, among others. To conclude, in both cases, the biggest challenge was to transform the project in a visitors-friendly digital form, make good use of the medium's advantages, and ensure its high quality and future maintenance. In the case of the competition, which is still running, what it was missed the most was the direct communication with our visitors. This used to give us all the necessary information to make this type of experience tailor-made and more interactive. We miss the students' unstated reactions, body language feedback, often indicative about what they understand, whether they are confused, interested or not, whether they need any encouragement. We should note here that during online meetings, students had their cameras switched off. Overall, we miss the channel of communication, which shows that the pedagogical process is on the right track. On the other hand, in the case of the digital platform project, which is still in progress, things became more complicated. In order to adapt to the new pandemic reality, instead of just organizing a virtual exhibition, the university decided to create a more complex, sophisticated cultural product with a longer time span. This new product aims to communicate the history and the heritage of the university to a wider and remote audience, as well as to link the past with the present. However, the pandemic restrictions led to a more sustainable solution and instant collaboration among various university partners. Additionally, we live in a period when technology develops very fast. Digital projects completed in 2021 might look outdated in aesthetics, structure, and engineering in 2022. So it's a great challenge to produce something that will not be outdated in just a few months. The COVID era demanded from cultural and academic institutions to rapidly transform their services and operation in a digital and remote access format. And the result of this work have their own value even when the pandemic will be over. But the decision we had to take and to work on come hand in hand with other some questions. Are these new museum services and projects in digital formats efficient enough for our public, for all kinds of museum communities? Which target group or museum visitors might be left out, and how can we include them with complementary activities? And a third one, how this digital project might affect the way we understand the very nature of knowledge, communication, and interaction. Let us see. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Evangelos. That was a very interesting presentation, and again, lots of great material there for I think for us to discuss. You really touched on some of the issues that actually Marta Lorenko touched on earlier today in the introduction about getting the right balance and finding exactly where museums sit in this kind of digital analog spectrum, if you like, and things like that. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us and for doing some reflection on that, and hopefully we'll get to discuss that very shortly. Now our next speaker is from Ankara University in Turkey, and this is Ayşem Yanar. Ayşem is an associate professor in the Ankara University Fine Arts faculty in the Department of Conservation and Restoration of Cultural Properties. And she's done lots of work with the textile collection at Ankara University, which has been a focus of much of her work. So Ayşem, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the participants. I would like to explain transferring the collection of textiles from the High Agricultural Institute into a virtual exhibition. High Agricultural Institute was established in 1933, and the institute was binded to Ankara University in 1946. And institute include natural sciences, agricultural, veterinary, and agricultural arts. First, academic studies were conducted two ways. First way is academic staffs and research assistants studies, and second way is undergraduate courses and surveys. The first PhD thesis is the natural and importance of native people's handicrafts. It's very important in terms of agricultural arts, rural handicrafts, and also rural areas. And with the start of education and training activities in the 1930s, handicrafts made, especially in rural areas, were determined. Academicians and students gathered different weaving and clothing elements from various regions by conducting field research, survey, and they continued their education and research activities related about native handicrafts. These handicrafts are handled by Ankara University Faculty of Fine Arts as a special collection. And the collection has moved 3 times. Faculty opened a professional store and academic staff completed the conservation and restoration works. Faculty plans to organize an exhibition with this collection and also willing to design an online and virtual exhibition to make the collection before accessible. In this exhibition, there will be a combination of contemporary objects which are related to old native handicrafts, and objects from the collection are determined and their situation is detected. The database of collection is prepared, information of the database is prepared, documentation of the works taken into collection through photography, transferring to identified information to virtual museum database, identification of objects to be transferred on online exhibition, and classification of selected objects of display, designing the virtual exhibition, and preparing the educational materials for virtual exhibition, completion of web design and publication of the web page for the online exhibition. As a result of the rapidly increasing migration from the village to the city in the 21st century, traditional values have begun to change, and that has highlighted two perspectives in folklore. Cultures are not static. This variability pushes the world towards a monocultural structure called mass culture by pushing the acceptable limits to the reasons such as rapid technology use, intense urbanization, and globalization. With the development and spread of information technologies, museums are also started to be digitized. A new type of museum called a virtual museum has emerged. In addition to virtual museums, the efforts to transfer the collections of many museums to digital platforms have evolved over time into preparing exhibitions, conducting educational activities, and audience participation on digital platforms. Although many museums have closed their doors due to the epidemic, they successfully continue to meet with the public via the internet. The Ministry of Culture and Tourism started the virtual museum application at the end of March 2019 in Turkey. 13 state museums are opened in sanalmuse.gov.tr as a virtual platforms. At museum have apps, gallery, interactives, virtual reality experience, video, exhibition, teasers, social media, marketing, online museum shops, ticketing, and software, and CRM, DAM, CMS databases, the list goes on. And with all this tech come the expectations from the speed users' experiences and amazing content that we have come to expect outside of museums. Digital collections are the most important issue from them at all after epidemic. Now I would like to show an example from some digital textile exhibition in the world. This museum's online exhibition is successful. I can say that I took these museums are an example. And Victoria and Albert Museum Digital Collection, Sadi Berkan'ın Museum Digital Collection, and also Ankara Ethnographically Museum Virtual Museum Tour, Istanbul Turkish Islamic Arts Museum. And I would like to some items from the collections. This is the web page, textiles from Higher Agricultural Institute web page. And some examples of Agricultural Institute brands handicrafts, some weavings, and some clothes. And the High Agricultural Institute has a plate, and this plate, every textiles has this plate. And online collection are gathered in 3 groups: weavings, clothing elements, and products for use, some items, as we can see on slide 3 group. And our articles, which is related to High Horticultural Institute, and catalogs on this topic, and some activities. And education, museum suitcase, new version of collection products, products were presented to the students with the education suitcase and education package. As a result of historical significant collections was turned into a visual exhibition and delivered to the public. The cultural heritage has been documented, and its transfer between generations has been ensured. The site is currently unavailable. English page preparation are still in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayşem. That was terrific. Really interesting, and very interesting to also hear not only about the collection that you've been working with there, but also to hear some of the theoretical things that have been concerning you around digitization and stuff like that. And hopefully we'll get to discuss them in a little while once we finish with the last 2 presentations that we have. So our next presentation is, we're going to move away from Turkey just for a short moment. We'll come back to Turkey again shortly, but we're next going to hear from Lisa ONeill from Boston University, and also from the University of the Arts Helsinki in Finland. So definitely Lauren is very much a global practitioner. Lauren was the director and curator of the Lamont Gallery at Phillips Exeter Academy, and a doctoral candidate at the University of the Arts in Helsinki. And she is now a senior lecturer in arts administration at Boston University. And she's going to talk to us on what moves us in exhibitions, from representations to relationships. All yours, Lauren.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the conference organizers and Andrew and Martin and the other speakers. This presentation examines the Being and Feeling Alone Together exhibition at the Lamont Gallery, which was held in the spring and summer of 2020. And While some of the components of the exhibit, including the title, were developed well before the pandemic, most of the exhibit actually unfolded in relation to the impacts that the pandemic produced. While the project was not canceled, it did move in different and unusual ways. We were off to a good start. The artwork was slowly arriving, travel plans were being made, we were unpacking and installing. We were excited by the suite of programs with our visiting artists and our community. And then everything became quiet. The email came. You know the one. I think you all got it. The campus will be closed due to COVID-19. All non-essential employees and those able to work from home must do so to the fullest extent possible. There will be no public events or in-person gatherings, and students will not be returning to campus. In the weeks leading up to this shutdown and during the shutdown, questions went back and forth, decisions were made, unmade, and remade. At first I said, we're still planning to open the exhibit in March. Yeah, definitely. Wait, let's reschedule. Yes, I can change my flight. The mat board is stuck in shipping limbo. Can we install the pieces in other frames for now? Do you still want me to send you the last two works? They're closing the borders. I don't think I can get there. Maybe we'll be open by June. I think it went like that for everyone, everywhere. So our question as a very small academic gallery with very limited staff resources was what to do. My challenge for recasting the project was to become responsive to this strange new world and its potentials. It's one thing to claim this theoretically, but quite another to actually do it. Artists and curators, Rax Media Collective, suggest cultivating wonder, which makes ideally it possible for the curator to set in motion a series of open-ended interpretive maneuvers, a set of cultures in a laboratory that seek to take a work of art or an exhibition and its public into areas that may not necessarily have been anticipated by its creators and custodians. After catching my breath, I wondered, if our movements in and through the artworks and the gallery were going to be restricted, what else could emerge? What moves and what moves us in an exhibition, if not the objects and artists and audiences? One of the most powerful ways we're moved in exhibitions have to do with relational and emotional impacts, which was actually the theme of this exhibition. There could be a connection between a visitor and an object, or a way that objects and exhibitions can spark memories, reflections, and conversations. Despite our field's emphasis on the visual, it is often much less about the representations than about the relationships those displays foster. I wondered, why don't we take this to heart? Our interpretive maneuver was to recommit to the roots of the word curate, to care. Interestingly, the word curate and the word care also relate to the word curious. To that end, we emphasized inclusion and welcome, discovery, and connection. Care is trendy right now. Sometimes we're guilty of enacting it only in short-term or performative ways. But I had to ask myself, within these pandemic conditions, what do I really mean by care? What does it look like in practice? And why haven't I emphasized it before? I grounded curatorial care in three main areas: support of and advocacy for gallery employees, listening and responding to the campus community, and supporting the artists and public audiences. I did these things on a regular basis. I think we all do, but somehow it felt like a priority in a different way. Give you a sense of the staff. The staff were all part-time. Most were on call and contingent, non-benefited employees. With the gallery's many programs and activities and our penchant for departmental parties and outings, the gallery was an important point of social connection for all of us. How could I transition these employees into digital roles, especially for those who spent most of their time on the museum floor? Not everyone was ready to dive in. I had to become curious about what other skills or capacities I had missed in my staff and in myself, and encourage everyone to become open to new roles. We took advantage of all of the virtual trainings and workshops that were offered during that time. We were all learning together. I kept track of all of these workshops and developed projects for staff based on their interests and the new things that they were learning. Engagement actually increased during this time, despite that we were so anxious about the future. At one point, I wrote an email to my staff celebrating our spring accomplishments and to show my appreciation. Why didn't I do this more often? I also held regular meetings and provided paid time for training and these remote cultural outings for practical reasons. It was a means of ensuring that my staff got paid, especially important for our on-call employees. This actually gave me added fuel when I had to have those difficult conversations with our administration about furloughs and layoffs, which actually didn't end up happening. But it made me think a lot about the gaps between individual and departmental care versus institutional care. There's a lot of gaps there. I don't have answers for these issues, but I welcome conversation during this conference. I also sent care packages to staff and our student gallery proctors during this time. I worked with local businesses to give them a little bit of economic boost and to send basically messages of care to those who were involved in the gallery. These were very modest gifts, but they were appreciated. As one staff member wrote, cheering up COVID-depressed staff with surprise mailings of chocolate and pancakes was very special and unexpected. While I had thought of myself as a pretty good manager, in reality, it should not take a pandemic for us to do these things on a regular basis. In terms of the wider campus community, we asked people directly, what could the gallery do to support them during this time? We had heard a lot about other people's challenges and felt that the gallery could help address some of the feelings of loss and isolation. We worked with a local artist to offer free Art at Your Desk Zoom workshops, which added care and creativity to our daily lives, wherever we were. We also hosted semi-regular community and culture building meetings where various departments, the gallery, but all the other academic departments, could share their pandemic projects, learn from one another, and provide mutual support. Unsurprisingly, these were the best meetings that all of us attended. Prioritizing employee well-being contributed to innovations for our public-facing programs. Before the pandemic, a colleague had recommended the 99% Invisible podcast on the Guggenheim Museum, where the Guggenheim staff started to look at the actual building itself as an educational opportunity for the visitors, but one that was mutual. So the visitors were really part of the museum. In my notes about this podcast, I had written one of the lines from this, from the educational staff at the Guggenheim, and they said to the visitor, "You have an effect on this museum." Of all the ways I had sought to welcome audiences into the Lamont Gallery, I had never said this directly. It was certainly time to do so. Once it became clear we wouldn't reopen, we worked to support the audience in innovative ways and sustained ways. We met with them or corresponded with them after each event to learn how they experienced it. We also solicited ideas and welcomed their input for how to change the project going forward. I have to say, having the names and emails from the Zoom registrations was really helpful because it allowed me to reach out to audience members individually. And I really started to see them as a group of people that I knew and with whom I could collaborate. We could change the curatorial outcome in real time. Many of the visitors, including our students, lamented how they really wanted to see the gallery in person and be there and be with each other and see the objects. This led us to a number of changes, including images of the installed work in all of our events, which sort of made the experience more tangible and familiar. The feedback also prompted our gallery manager to explore lots of digital tools, including Adobe Spark, where you can navigate in and around artworks and get up close. We developed artist interviews, choreographic responses to the exhibit, a community letter project, and more. We launched our first 360 virtual tour with the help of our communications office. All this activity helped me bolster my case again when I had to justify to the administration why the artists were getting stipends if the gallery was closed. So CARE involves advocacy too. In the short days that we could access the gallery, we made every effort to create a beautiful show with signage, props, and resources, even if we didn't know if anyone would ever see it in person. These efforts communicated clearly to the artists that we took the exhibition seriously. As a result, they were willing to participate in some pretty fantastic and innovative ways. CARE sometimes means doing things that don't make sense to other people. Both internal and external audiences were appreciative of the opportunity to interact with the artists and with each other. Perhaps in some ways we were all closer than we would have been in the gallery. The Zoom squares allowed us to be digitally proximate across time zones, geographies, and desires. A visitor wrote to me, "Thank you so much for today's stimulating program. So welcome these days. It was a joy from my eyes, brain, and heart to share that experience with all of you." At that point, everything felt like an experiment, the days ahead unknown. For a few short months in 2020, we moved alone and together, creating new paradigms for conversation and care. I only hope that we can continue keeping these innovations in the academic museum and gallery world moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. That was fantastic. And I love the question from your administration. Why are these artists getting a stipend when the gallery's closed? I wonder how many people have been in a similar situation during closures. Some really great and really sort of thoughtful stuff there. It's really terrific. Anyway, I look forward to seeing how the conversation develops at the end of it. Anyway, we have one more presentation, another presentation from Ankara University. And this is a presentation by Serrano and Myrsini from Ankara University. Serrano is an associate professor at the university in the Department of Museology, and Myrsini is a professor in the Department of Educational Psychology and the director of the Ankara University Toy Museum. So now we'll hand over to you guys and hear about the Toy Museum in resistance, new challenges in times of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew Simpson. Thank you for all the participants and greetings from Turkey. As a starter, I'd like to mention my internet connection is limited in here, unfortunately. So if I can have any kind of unconnection, please just excuse me. I'm just going to talk about Ankara University Toy Museum. That museum is one of the first toy museums of Turkey. So that could be really interesting for us to give information about what we are just doing at the moment. Do you hear my voice at the moment? Okay, thank you. And I'm also talking about that museum because that museum is directly about toys, and especially the traditional toys in Turkey. That's a university museum. And we have traditional materials from rural districts, and we have first Ottoman toy products from Eyüp district, and we have some industrial toys from Istanbul in 1940s and 1960s, and different sort of Turkish plastic toys and the international plastic toys. And as I said before, we were the first toy museum in Turkey under the direct shade of a university, but we are not the only. At the moment, we have 13 more toy museums in our country. So the history of the toys just dated to 900 BC, 700 BC, so a long time ago. You can see a screen from the Museum of Anatolian Civilization. It shows the children, they are just playing with the knuckle bones, and children, they are just also whipping the peg toes. So it is very familiar with us to deal with the toys. So one of the most important issues and missions of Ankara University Toy Museum is also mapping the traditional and industrial toys of Turkey. You can see the Turkish traditional and both industrial toys all around this country. And we are also seeking the ways and also the chances to catch up the toys from history to history. And also, as I said before, we are also just having a mission to make a research about the historical backgrounds and present situations and maybe the future of the Turkish toys, both the industrial types and both the traditional types. And here is the list of the other Turkish toy museums all around this country. Of course, 13 is a not very quite formidable number, but also it is enough at the moment to make such a kind of research, economical research about the toys. What about our mission and also the vision? We'd like to be a child-friendly and also family-friendly museum under the directorate of an Ankara University. So we are just focusing on the history of the toys, not only the toys, but also the children's culture. And we are offering some programs and activities for learning by doing and experiencing. And maybe, of course, we have the aim to produce for and with the children. Everything just started in 1919. This is the old gallery of that museum, and many things changed in 2015. It seems we are just having a little makeup. Many things have changed. The galleries, the design, exhibit design has changed. The educational approaches are changed. Of course, the collection was the same. And we made lots of things between 2015 and 2021. We just attended the Erasmus Plus projects like the Education Needs Migration Using Professionals. Of course, in Turkish National Education Assembly also just made us different projects like Teachers' Perceptions of Museum. A night at the museum, lots of maker projects. We prepared educational kits of the museum and project science festivals. And of course, these were generally designed before COVID-19 pandemic. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, we just changed the style, of course, like an online. We got different size of backgrounds about 3D Museum of Ankara University Toy Museum maybe. And we got some temporary exhibitions, but they are on-site exhibitions, the face-to-face gallery. So that was very quite affordable experiences for us. And we got different temporary exhibitions. Some part of our collections just moved, the movable collections, they just traveled from some part of this country to another part of that country. And these are the brochures, the visual materials from our temporary exhibitions, as you know. So just Turkey and also the children of Turkey and young people of Turkey and museum goers and museum lovers were really interested in the traditional Turkish toy museums and maker activities we made in the museum and children's festivals, both national and international participations, and also that was really possible for us before COVID-19. And especially the Syrian immigrant children, they just created their own games for child rights projects in 2019 and 2020. And these are the educational kits. You can download all these kits for the primary school, the secondary school, and also the high school and etc. And we organized different sort of meetings with the participation of the other toy museums in Turkey. So these were some important subjects that we were really interested in. And we also just trained lots of museum volunteers all around this country. They also gave us a hand for children's trainings. But everything changed because as Lauren also insisted that the university just closed, and unfortunately we were a little bit far away from our students and everything changed. So we just tried to make both online and on-site exhibition. If people are fascinated, they can also come and enter that museum. If they are not, and if the closure is really possessed in Turkey, so it should be both and online. So we just named that exhibition as Toys in My Boxes. They are, this exhibition is the, of course, like a playing ground, and both the temporary exhibition, both virtual and on-site. So it started with the 5th of April and it just ended in 21st of May. So everything exactly changed, but that was the most important experience for us to have such a kind of experience during the pandemic. So you can, of course, still click this link to see the details of this both virtual and on-site exhibition. And that was also a Matterport explanation and the virtual tour from our toy museum and also from this temporary toy exhibition gallery. Both of them were just informative and both of them just gave the information for the people if they were exactly interested in having an information from their computers, like virtual information. So we understood that after the COVID pandemic situation, we just changed our minds, we just changed our exhibition styles. And of course, the online exhibition and online museum learning and training programs are especially essential. So we had to develop new museum spaces, we had to develop new exhibitions and new programs at the museum. So of course, developing the museum projects, both virtual projects and both on-site projects, are one of the most important aims of us. We had to diversify and increase the number of museum visitors. So during the closure of the pandemic, with the help with the hand of these online museum exhibitions, we just raised the number of our museum visitors. Of course, to determine the short and long-term impact of the museum visits, we are still working on. So this is a chance to transfer the wealth of the museum. This is also a chance, according to us, to create the future sources. This is also a chance, maybe remake the vision and mission and being long-term, developing new virtual relations and developing new museum volunteers maybe. And this is the solution, of course. Education kits, collaborations, and new online and on-site projects. I hope the time is limited, but I'm not the limited. The museums are not the limited, as we can see, but maybe it could be a good chance for us to make new collaborations. Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And that was very interesting. Really great to hear a story from a toy museum in the university system. There used to be a very well-known, it was called the Museum of Childhood at an Australian university many years ago. But unfortunately, it disappeared with restructuring and things like that. So it was delightful to see that that museums that focus on toys and childhood are still a big part of the higher education system in Turkey. That's great. Okay, now thank you very much to all of the speakers who have made a presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute, but before I do, and you can either make a comment or pose a question to one or to even to all of our 5 speakers. But before I do, I'd like to just make the general observation that the sense that I got from every one of the presentations is that you all felt that the changing circumstances of the pandemic was actually something that stimulated you to think differently about your professional practice and to also perhaps try new things, to try things that you wouldn't normally try under normal sort of non-pandemic circumstances, if you like. And I like the way that every museum has had a different approach and a different response, because they've been affected, I guess, in different ways, depending on how severe the pandemic's been, depending on whatever the local government requirements were regarding opening and closure and people and things like that. So it was really great to see that the most obvious reaction was people thinking, okay, then what are the most important things I need to hold on to here, and how can they be developed and supported? And as I say, that came through in all of the presentations. I think if you'd like to either ask a question or make a comment, There's a number of ways of doing it. You can either raise your hand using the Zoom system that we're using and ask a question, or you could post some questions in the chat. I've been watching the chat. Martin has posted some interesting links there, and please do post any links that you might find. You might believe that people will find interesting, because all of the chats will be saved and recorded as well. So there is a chance for the kind of resources and resource sharing to extend well beyond the life of this session. Perhaps as a way of kicking off the conversation, I would like to first ask all the speakers whether your general feeling was that the challenges of the pandemic and your own working situation, am I correct in interpreting that you found it in a way an uplifting experience, and an experience that drove you to new heights and to try new things? I'd be interested to hear from all of you, but perhaps Gustavo, you might like to start, because it seems to me that your museum and your gallery has already been on this digital journey for a long time. But did you find that the impact of the pandemic actually caused you to perhaps accelerate the digital journey? How do you feel about that?
Of course, Andrew, we started before the pandemic, and for the reason when the pandemic begins, we are ready to stay online. I think that this is the advantage of a start before, but we never think that the COVID comes. But the main lesson of this is we need to stay prepared for the unsuspect, because if the museum probably have different emergencies in the next years, because we never know about climate, we never know about politics, we never know about COVID or other kinds. And the main lesson for us is we need to stay prepared.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's that sort of sense of agility and the ability to actually be able to not just rethink your practices, but also change your practices. Because it's interesting when you hear a lot of the commentary about the pandemic. There are people predicting that it's going to go on for quite some years yet. There'll be new variants, there'll be new challenges, there'll be, we'll have to learn how to live differently than what we did in pre-pandemic times. So I think it's that ability to sort of stay agile. I'd also be interested to hear Lauren's perspective on how you face it, because I got a clear sense from your presentation that you actually focused directly on what were the important things about the community that's associated with a small academic gallery, and how they could be supported during these kind of challenging times. And did you feel that you and the group were somehow uplifted because of how you responded to these circumstances?
Yeah, definitely. First, I do also want to acknowledge that I think the early months of the pandemic and now the continued months of the pandemic are exhausting. They really take a toll on the museum sector and on the arts and cultural sector and on many other sectors. So I think that there's a tendency even, for me to sort of say, it was all great, it was all uplifting, but we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of loss and pain. And I think what was interesting is by externalizing roles and exchanging roles in the gallery setting, in the academic museum and gallery setting, we were really able to collaborate in a way that we hadn't done before, right? So there's a lot of hierarchy, even in small institutions, there's a lot of hierarchy. But none of us could do it alone. Like, we literally couldn't do it alone. And so we had to think about, we have these amazing assets in our immediate community, our students, our colleagues, our audiences. This goes a little bit, it sounds like crowdsourcing, but that's not really what we were doing. We were having a series of thoughtful conversations that helped us co-produce what this new exhibit would look like. And I think that is an innovation. It's going to change things going forward in a significant way. So yeah, it's a really, just hearing all of your presentations has been a really wonderful opportunity to think about these issues.
Yeah, thank you. And I really like the way that you also focused on, that sort of trio of curate, care, and curious, and picked up on the point that they all have the same sort of Latin root or derivation, if you like. And that became the focus. So it sort of turned into a real community building sort of an effort. I'd like to hear actually from Evangelos. Was this your experience as well? And I ask you this because I know that from the history of, from the history of Greece, that the 200-year celebration and the 200-year anniversary of the revolution is an incredibly historically significant anniversary, and yet you suddenly had to rethink how you were going to approach all of that because of the challenges. Did you also feel that you were sort of uplifted by that additional challenge?
The most important, the problem was how can to promote this kind of anniversary and to promote all this kind of things and plethora of cultural actions that the government and many cultural institutions had organized. But finally, after the pandemic outbreak, this was the problem. How can to transform them, all of them program into a digital transformation, and to explain to all these people, to all this audience all around the world about this kind of anniversary and how important it is for the total build community or total humanity. I don't know. And just think about that in our museum, in the heart of the historical center of Athens, the pandemic create a very, very serious problem because just think about that all this historical center every year has a lot of millions of visitors, and suddenly we don't have none. So every cultural organization, the historical center, has to face this digital transformation of their services to become more alert and flexible, as I mentioned to my presentation. So we have to rethink all these kind of services, and of course to rethink or make our new digital future. To rethink this kind of storytelling about how to come closely to our audience. And this is a very, very special issue for us, and for our colleagues.
Yeah, I guess, and it's like the point that Lauren made about rethinking it in terms of relationships rather than just the objects, but and their sort of visual appeal, I guess, in an art gallery context anyway. You might have a focus on the visual interpretation and what it means visually, but it's also important to develop a whole range of emotional relationships as well. And this would be pertinent to the types of material that you're working with when you're relating it to something like a historic anniversary. So yeah, that was very interesting. Perhaps I'd like to also maybe hear from Ayşem. I really liked the presentation, particularly about the textiles in the collection there, and it sort of touched on me in terms of thinking about how the keynote we just heard from Henry McGee about the rights of Indigenous people and human justice issues and so forth. And I'm very sort of intrigued to learn about your museum and the way in which the Agricultural Museum actually preserves these sort of traditional textiles from Indigenous people of some areas. If that's if I've understood what you were presenting correctly, and I'm wondering whether this that I guess the pandemic has inspired you, like all the other presenters, to think of new ways in which you're going to present that material to wider audiences. Would you like to make a comment on that, Ayşem? Oops, she might have disappeared. Anyway, Martin has his hand up. So Martin, would you care to either ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that there are now various comments in the chat in the last 10 minutes.
Oh, right.
The first one is from Hartwig Kreutler, a very specific question about the influence of the pandemic. I assume that staff relations changed. Were the structures that you wish to take over into post-pandemic? I think this is a question we, in a lot of places, what do we take out of the pandemic? I think that question goes to everyone of the panel. And the next question is from, and I'm probably saying the name wrong, from Sivuk Musiana. I'm really sorry. Hi, thanks for the presentation. To all presenters, how do you get support from the university? Does the museum have or make some business plan for the university during a pandemic? Thank you very much. And then there's a third question. Hi, Andrew. I have a question for Director Serrano. I'm not sure who said it. Hola. How has your
Gustavo?
Gustavo. Okay. Hola. How has your partnership with Google Arts and Culture helped the overall operations or promotions of your museum? Gracias.
Okay, so we want to tackle some of those questions. Thank you, Martin, for pointing out what was going on in the chat there. Gustavo, would you like to answer that question about Google Arts that's in the chat there?
Of course, Carlos. Thanks. First of all, I will say that the partnership with Google is principal to digitalize some of works of our collection and to put our collection in the platform of arts and culture. And the other is to make a special report or curatorships inside the platforms. And for the reason, for us, is a good partnership that give us the platforms and help to us to support this kind of platform, because our university is a largest university, but don't have the enough money to make a big platform and a global audience. And for the reason we made this alliance with Google Arts. And Google Arts support a lot of museums around the world, not only us. This is more than 1,000 museums around the world, and especially to different kind of collection, and every month made a special kind of exhibition about textiles, contemporary art, photography, etc. And the last year for us was very, very successful, because we are chosen from Google to the 10 museums of contemporary art to visit online. And for the reason our visits increased a lot, because you know that Google is a big company that bring more influence to the cultural every topic. But it's easy to stay to contact with arts and culture. Probably you can write to the arts and culture, and a local supporter gives you the support to how to stay. The first is a simple agreement to stay with the program, and then they give you support with our camera. It's a special camera that capture in gigapixels, and it's the form to start. I think that the last year was increased a lot of the visits of museums online.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gustavo. Okay, we've still got a few more minutes left. Maybe we might try and tackle that question from our colleagues in Indonesia who have posted the question to all the presenters. How do you get support from the university? It's a great question, and one that can be quite difficult when your university says to you things like, why are you paying these artists when you're closed? Does the museum have to make a business plan for the university during the pandemic? So were you all required to sort of rethink your planning and negotiate with your host universities? Anyone like to make a quick comment on that? Nobody?
I can just start out, but I'd love to hear from the other presenters. We were not required initially to make any kind of business plan. I think it was a great idea that you have recommended that we do so. I found initially that the institution was so overwhelmingly concerned with the students that they really had no bandwidth left to think about the gallery at all. So in some ways that was good, because we were left to innovate
your own devices,
with a lot of freedom. But as the months were on, I increasingly started to document what we were doing, visually, in terms of audience participation, using every metric I could in order to start to share that with the university and or with the institution and get support for change. But I'd love to hear how the other presenters address and work with their institutions.
Yeah, anybody else like to comment on that?
I just want to add one other thing. I mean, just thinking about this issue is that at this point in the pandemic, I feel like we are all now rushing to fill in space. And so it's wonderful to have a lot of tools and technologies and new initiatives, but maybe going back to the keynote, I think Henry's, all the points that he raised about sustainability in a really broad, thinking about that word broadly and all the implications. I think in some ways the field needs to step back and not rest on its laurels and not take action, but to step back and have a little time to be reflective about the choices we make, because the systems and structures that we put into place in our academic museums and galleries absolutely drive those choices. And so, what is sustainable in terms of employees, in terms of audiences? Marta even said in the comments to the keynote, in terms of resources that we use in museums and galleries.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know what the balance is, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, and it's a great to think that, again, if that is one of the outcomes of the pandemic, that people do actually just stop and sit back and reflect and think more deeply about some of these bigger picture issues, then that's, again, another positive that's come out with it. Okay, look, we might just finish off with one final question that was posted in the chat there, and it's a really interesting one. And again, I'd be interested to hear from any one of the speakers if you wanted to make a comment on it. And that was that have staff relations changed and have the structures of your staff relations changed as a result of the pandemic? And are there any structures that you wish to carry with you into post-pandemic times? Now, I know that a lot of, or I know that some university museums would say we need more digital producers, but perhaps there are other positions too that have come about from the as a result of the pandemic. So it's an interesting interesting question. Anybody care to venture any thoughts on that at all? You guys look like you're all zoomed out. I think, look, I'd just like to finish off then in that case by saying thank you very much to all the presenters. It was very, very interesting and great to hear about all your different experiences from all around the world. And it was really great to hear not only the different perspectives, but also the way that many of you have sort of faced up to the challenges to your professional circumstances creatively and with lots of important and new sort of projects and approaches to how you do your work. So it was very interesting indeed. So thank you again. If you could all join me now in hitting the applause button, which is down here in the reactions part, we'll say thank you very much to all our speakers, and we'll see you in another session shortly. Thank you, Martin.
Yes, we go now to the workshops, and but don't forget the video club this evening. This will be a more informal and relaxed thing. Okay, see you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.